Hey everyone, this video is basically the Reader's Digest version of a nearly 4-hour live stream I did the other night. I aimed to give my thoughts on the Heroes Rising movie while they were fresh in my head, but as usual I got off on a ton of tangents and it ended up being 300% longer than it needed to be. Because this is a live stream cut down to be much more succinct and to the point, I'm super fidgety, I'm not as articulate and composed as I'd like to be. I do swear some, and it's just not as polished as my normal scripted videos. If that bothers you, please heed that warning. But for people who don't have 4 whole hours to watch an old live stream on demand, I wanted to give a much shorter, more to the point version of my thoughts. That's all. Hello everyone and welcome back. It's your host Michelle, aka Chat-Mort, and thank you so much for turning once again to my humble little channel. I just thought, since I'm back from the... Which side of the screen is it on? The Thing, the movie. Oh, why is he here? Just because I love him. I just thought that while my thoughts are fresh in my head, I would discuss this movie. It's not going to be a very comprehensive, review per se. I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts and my reaction. I have to say, I really, really did like it. I do think it was better than the first movie. I do think this one was more solid. I think the storytelling was tighter. I enjoyed the overall vibe of it, I guess, more than the first movie, as much as I really did have a blast with the first movie. Talk more about Dobby, stream will never end. I know. Okay, so let's talk about that, shall we? That's a good way to start. They were total cock teases with the League, okay? So they know everybody's getting into the League now, especially the people who read ahead. Everybody's super into the League because they're getting way and way more badass. So they open the movie with shit relating to the League. And there's 10 minutes of the League in the whole movie. And they're not even the League, they're twice as clones that melt when they're closed in on by people chasing them. But that's the premise, because all the bad guys in the movies have to relate to All for One and, by extension, Shigaraki and everybody. I did not appreciate that at all. Because I was okay, I've heard people talk about Shigaraki being in this movie. I've seen a screen cap of Dobby that I've never seen anywhere before, so I know it's from the movie. You got like 30 seconds of dialogue from every character, right? You got if Toga's your waifu, you got 3 lines from Toga the whole movie. There's 1 line from Twice. Twice is my waifu. There's 1 line from Twice in the whole movie, and everybody's into Dobby. So Dobby had more lines. Dobby probably had, Spinner had a lot of lines. Why is Spinner always the getaway driver? I don't understand this. It's they just replicated scenes from the show. So they only show up for a tiny bit, but obviously that's the premise for the movie. They're transporting this spooky looking person in a pod, a Mewtwo pod or whatever, in the back of this truck. The heroes track the truck down and they incapacitated or whatever, and they melt away, and then they talk about oh, I wonder what was in the truck we were transporting, and they're well, all for one, or whoever All for One's person was who told them to do it, said don't worry about it, so whatever. And then Toga's that just makes me want to know more. It was the barest justification, the tiniest bit of justification to have them in the movie at all. They just threw them in there because everybody's getting into the League the closer we get to the meta liberation arc shit, which I thought was sleazy and I didn't appreciate it. But anyway, they showed, oh, this new spooky villain person got free, and that's going to be the villain for this movie, because every movie has a different villain, evidently. So the premise of the movie is fine, and I also think it was pretty skillful, because the first movie took place in a specific spot between 2 exact episodes of season 3, I guess, of My Hero Academia. There was even a really weird, ham-fisted, poorly done, really shitty, montage voiceover episode in season 3 of My Hero Academia that clued you into, this is just a 30-minute promo of the movie that's poorly cobbled together. Go see the movie. That takes place between the previous episode and the next one. This one, they didn't do that. Not to my knowledge, at least. I'm pretty sure they learned from how heavy-handed and poorly executed that was last time. They did a very, very good job with being very, very kind of cautious and measured in what details they gave. Like, they made it clear what sort of era this happened in, but they also had to be careful too, because like obviously a ton of fans are reading ahead and they've heard stuff about characters and things that are coming up. They want to give you establishing information, and they put it a little bit ahead of where we are in the anime in order to get people more hyped up for the stuff that's coming, to make it feel more important. I think they did that very well. Like, Hawks was in the movie, and I appreciate that. Like, with Hawks, they weren't teases about it. It wasn't like, oh, there's 3 lines from my boyfriend the whole movie. There's 1 line from Twice the whole freaking movie. There's like 2 lines from Toga. They could have just had Dobby and Spinner, because those were the people in the truck transporting him. They could have just had the 2 of them. And Shigaraki plays a role later on, so they could have had him later. But they didn't need to do like, let's do cameos of everybody from the league who we slap on merchandise. That didn't make it feel more like the show. It didn't at all. It felt like how in this season of My Hero Academia, they keep mentioning Hawks, and they show like his silhouette, and they show him from the back, and in totally ham-fisted ways they mention him because the fandom is so freaking obsessed with Hawks that they can't stand it. And they know if they like put him in really ungratifying ways, it'll still get people more and more excited, and I don't appreciate that. Hawks was not that way. He played a role that literally anybody could have played in the movie. And I'm sure Horikoshi had Hawks, you know, kind of act as the vehicle for all these plot devices, because everybody's obsessed with Hawks, as they should be. He's gorgeous and charming and just a really, really cool character. I love Hawks, dude. Holy shit, I love him. And there was like a Hawks Endeavor interaction, and Endeavor's in the movie a little bit. But again, with Endeavor, like, you know, I guess it's cool he was in the movie, sort of. But again, it was more like a cameo. I know there's a purpose for cameos in movies, but it just feels condescending to me. I do not like feeling condescended to as a viewer. But they did a very good job of somebody, like on the commission or whatever, somebody referenced Hawks's role in the story and what goes on with his character coming up. So they established that we're a little bit ahead in the story, kind of, from where we are now, but they also didn't explicitly spoil what happens with Hawks. They referenced them in a way that people like me got, but people like my fiance, who's just now catching up on the manga, it didn't spoil anything for him, which, you know, they handled that well. Hi guys, Future Michelle here. I wanted to let you guys know that looking into this further, it seems like this movie is far darker than the tone of the manga around the current time, because it has been officially stated to take place far ahead of where we are in the anime. People were guessing that it took place after season 4. I saw some Redditors saying that they thought it took place somewhere between seasons 5 and 6, or even after season 6. I found the official interview that some of these excerpts have been taken from, so I'm just going to show them to you and read them to you so you can get the full context. The interviewer asks when the movie story takes place, and Nagasaki, who is the person on the team who is doing the interview, said, Horikoshi-sensei told us he wanted the movie to take place in the winter. If we take into consideration the timeline in season 4, this movie takes place quite some time after the current season. One of the earlier questions in this interview kind of addresses this as well. The interviewer was asking how much Horikoshi was involved in the writing of this movie, and while he didn't write it himself, he explicitly signed off on everything, and they were asking him a lot of questions about what they could and couldn't include. He said, we wanted to make sure that the story was in balance with the manga, so we asked him things that should or should not be included. He answers really quickly, so we were able to go through the pre-production stage very quickly. I can't reveal much details, but some of the characters in the movie coincide with the manga. Of course, Hawks also makes an appearance in the film. We've laid out a lot of content that even manga readers will be able to enjoy. So when I found out that this movie takes place so far ahead of canon, at least in regard to the progression of the anime, my question was, why? Why on earth would they do this when they've revealed a lot of things that haven't happened yet in the anime that are only going to benefit people who are completely caught up in the manga and possibly ahead of where the official translations are even released at yet? If they had pushed this movie back to next winter or even the winter after that, it would have happened much more close chronologically to what's actually happening in the story, and it would have caused so much less confusion. And with the answer that Nagasaki gives, he makes it sound like they did that on purpose in order to make sure that they were kind of throwing a bone to the people who read the manga as well as the people who just watch the anime. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I don't think people who read the manga are going to be upset that this movie takes place in chronological order with where the anime is currently. That's just how that works. I still don't really understand that, but if Horikoshi told them he wants the movie to take place in the winter, then that's just where it had to take place. So again, I have to trust the master. He's a brilliant writer, and I'm sure there's a reason why he decided that this had to be the case. But I wanted to make sure that you guys knew that now that I knew it for sure. I really liked how in this movie everybody from Class 1A had really good moments. Everybody had a time to shine. They had a time to use their quirk. From what I remember, they did that in the first movie, but in the first movie it felt more cobbled together. This movie, it felt much more organic. The way different characters got their own screen time and got to play significant, important roles in the plot overall. They did it much, much better this time around, and it was fun too because a lot of the more minor characters in Class 1A, who are just more minor characters because they're not in Midoriya's immediate clique of friends, they're really cool. It was nice to have participation from the rest of Class 1A that was meaningful, impactful, extremely relevant to, pivotal to the advancement of the story, as opposed to these weird cameos or condescending shoehorned in marketing tactic thingies. It was just nice to see everybody. And Ida, for once, was not relegated to this obnoxious, almost satirical caricature of himself, which he is a lot in the show, which is so sad because I love Ida. I think he's got a ton of potential as a character, and the whole Ingenium arc thing with Stain was fantastic. It was nice to see Aoyama doing some things that actually contributed to the story instead of him being the weird stereotypical just gay, eccentric, effeminate character. Mineta obviously was funny, but he was relevant to and instrumental in things moving forward in the way they did. Tokoyami, finally we got to see some pretty significant stuff happen with Tokoyami. I really enjoyed that. It was very satisfying. He's such a cool character, and he really has not had the opportunity yet. And I know that's going to come up in the future. How unique of a character he is and how cool his power is has not been highlighted much in the story, and this movie was really cool because he had quite a bit of emphasis, and what compelled him to go beyond I worked it into a sentence, seriously, was really cool to see these characters and their bonds and their camaraderie and friendship, and who they're willing to do anything to defend is cool. One of the things I didn't care for so much was that obviously the trailers showed the villains a lot, because there's the main villain in this movie, and he's got 3 henchmen, and there's the sexy booby lady who's really scary, and then there's just the kind of angsty normal looking dude, and then there's a gargantuan ass werewolf guy who does a special beam cannon from his mouth. They didn't explain how he can do that exactly. I'm not sure. It felt a little bit far-fetched to me, but the villains didn't get much character development. And I understand that that's pretty commonplace when it comes to sidekicks. The three henchmen or followers of the main villain guy were particularly underdeveloped, and their personalities could have been kind of showcased a little bit with their quirks. And maybe they were a little bit, but during their fights, because each of them had significant battles with different little groups from Class 1A, and they weren't fleshed out personality-wise. And that's not necessary, but I would have appreciated it. As far as the main antagonist of the film, he needed to be fleshed out more. He had a very typical, like, delusional god complex sort of goal for the world. And, you know, he could have allied with anybody to accomplish it. And it's something that, like, a lot of people would get a god complex if they have a strong quirk. You know, it makes sense that would lend itself to that kind of psychology. You want to know if it was good. You don't care about spoilers. I thought it was good. I did. It could have been better, but I think it was better than the first movie, and I really liked the first movie. I did like it. The main villain was lacking backstory and context for why he did what he did. And for having raised the stakes as high as they were, for him having been as significant of a plot device as he was, in this movie being the catalyst for the shit that went down during this movie, he was not developed enough. He wasn't. His motivations were not contextualized enough, and they could have easily allocated like 7 more minutes of the movie to like a couple foreboding clips of somebody that you find out is him beforehand, and just a little bit of his inner monologue. They could have made him so much more tangible, and they could have given you so much more to appreciate in regard to him as a villain, and they really didn't. He was gorgeous. He was sexy. His character design was very cool, and he was scary. He posed a massive threat, like power level wise. But he could have been much more visceral. He could have been somebody you could get emotionally invested in. And they just didn't. They just didn't do that, and I wish they had. So I wanted to read some things from the official interview done about this movie to clarify some of the questions I had and give you the official answers. In regard to my criticism that they didn't really give the villains enough backstory, the interviewer said the same thing. It seems like there is a lot of mystery surrounding this powerful villain group. So the guy from the movie team who did this interview, Nagasaki, said, "Nine has many different types of allies, ranging from a beast-type character to a type of mummy. Each character has very dark designs, and they all have villainous backgrounds. However, if we were to just focus on that, it would lead to a very dark path. Since this is a story of heroes, it's only natural that we should delve into their backstories as well. However, since we also want to make a story that people of all ages can enjoy, we decided to focus more so on creating contents with a high entertainment value. The result is a hot and exciting story that is very BNHA-esque." Well, personally, I have to disagree with this, and at least the writers were self-aware enough to acknowledge that they had to justify not giving the villains any backstory because it made them very uninteresting and difficult to engage with or care about in any way. Horikoshi is very nuanced in his character development, and even people who are objectively doing horrible things and need to be stopped cause you to feel conflicted because he gives them context for what they're doing, and he gives them depth, and he makes them tangible to where they can be somewhat sympathetic. So you never feel completely on one side or the other in the middle of any battle. You can't shut out and completely dehumanize the side you're not rooting for. I don't like that they tried to make this for all ages. That makes it sound a lot more like a cash grab. There's a very specific audience of people who are going to watch this movie, and that's people who are watching the show. Nobody goes to an anime movie just out of nowhere. It's not like a Pokemon movie. It's not like some random IP movie that they just decided to revamp and some studio made an independent story out of. You're not going to go see this movie unless you are already invested in canon. So to try to lighten the mood of the movie doesn't make any sense. And if you consider chronologically where this movie is taking place, it really doesn't make any sense to not have delved into what's going on with the villains, because in the manga, what's going to happen in season 5 or possibly pushed back to season 6 is so dark that it's not shonen anymore. I don't know what it is. Almost gaunts, but the manga gets extremely dark. So for this to chronologically take place that far ahead makes it almost weirdly lighthearted in comparison to what else is happening and the shift in storytelling tone at that time. I clearly don't agree with their decisions here to try and make this a fun, wacky adventure for the whole family, essentially, but I wanted to make sure you guys got that context because it's very relevant to that criticism I had. I thought All Might would be in this movie more than he was, and I really appreciate that they didn't force cameos of him in. Where All Might does appear or where he's referenced, it's necessary and relevant. So I appreciate that. I still feel like the Endeavor cameo toward the beginning was kind of a cameo when they're pursuing the League, and the League has this like person in a capsule in a truck, the same kind of truck the League is always stealing. It just felt weird. It felt like they copied and pasted a chunk from like the League going after Chizaki after he had been apprehended. It just felt like they copied and pasted literal scenes from the anime for this, which was weird. Like, any heroes could have been pursuing the League, I guess, at the beginning of the movie. And it makes sense they would have some high-profile ones doing so. And I mean, yeah, that makes sense because the League is high-profile, so they would have some of the best heroes go after them. But it could have been anybody pursuing them at the beginning. So it did feel like with Endeavor and a couple other people, the cameos were a little bit forced. And again, like with Hawks, anybody could have been doing the shit that Hawks did in this movie. Anybody. But it did kind of enhance his character in that it showcased how bright he is. Like, he figured stuff out fast. Like, what's going on with them? They are far away from any help. Class 1A is. And Hawks immediately puts the pieces together and figures out what's going on, and he goes to get them help like that. That helps to aid in understanding how bright his character is, because that's something later on when he shows up more in the actual anime. I don't know if it's a spoiler or not to say, but people tend to underestimate Hawks. So in that regard, I don't know if it was a good thing or not, you know, to show how bright he is, how intuitive he is, how quick of a thinker he is. Because it's kind of fun to see Hawks from the perspective of other characters in the manga, where he acts really laid back and kind of airheaded and effortless. And how bright he is not something he wears on his sleeve. I appreciate that the emphasis of this movie was more on 1A. You know, the last movie was still very much about All Might. And that's fair, you know. I adore All Might, and he's a crucial, pivotal part of the story. It focused more on Class 1A, as it should, as the future, as the focus, as the fate of Japan shifts to being on the shoulders of 1A. It felt different. And that could be totally my perception, and it almost definitely is. This is probably a point you can disregard entirely, but it felt, the feeling of this movie, like Two Heroes, is that what the first one was called? I don't even remember, which is so sad. Two Heroes felt, it had the same feel, it had the same vibe, it had the same energy and momentum and kind of level of being upbeat that the show did at the exact time chronologically in the show when Two Heroes took place. But Heroes Rising feels a little bit darker, a little bit more hurried, a little bit more mature, I would even venture to say, than where we are currently in the release of the episodes of season 4. And I think that was strategic. I think they put out the movie ahead of where the anime is to make you even more excited for the things that are coming up. I think it was a very intelligent sort of teaser on their part. So, let's get toward the end here. Spoilers! Should I bring up my, like, idiotic little banner I made in MS Paint again? Needs more Dobby. Perfect. So as I was saying, I remember reading in one of the earlier chapters, because Horikoshi will put a little message with most chapters that he releases of My Hero Academia. He was saying, he was thanking everybody, he was excited about the movie coming up. He said that he doesn't think there will be another one after the second one, because he wasn't expecting it. And when they approached him about it, he didn't know what else to do, because the stakes were so high in that first movie, you know, with the imagery of Midoriya and All Might doing that smash move together against a villain. How do you up the ante beyond that point? Horikoshi said in one of his little author's messages to the readers that he had to take something that he had planned for the finale of the series and put it in this movie, because he didn't know how else to, like, authentically up the stakes for this movie. I may be wrong in my assumption, but I'm fairly certain that I know which thing that happened at the end of this movie he's referring to, that he took out of his plans for the finale of the series altogether in order to up the stakes for this movie. What happens basically is this villain it's kind of like a microcosm of the whole series. This movie is. The villain of the movie is given the ability to steal other people's quirks. So it's a lot like All for One's ability to steal other people's quirks. His body breaks down when he uses immensely strong quirks from a ton of other people. And what he needs is a quirk that will heal his body when it begins to break down. And so he targets somebody who has that quirk who he can steal it from, and everybody's trying to protect them. The villain is pretty stereotypical, pretty power hungry, and they have to stop him from doing this bad thing that is very much an all for one type thing to do. This villain appears, he and his henchmen show up, and there's an initial battle where it is demonstrated that once he is pushed to a certain point, despite how incredibly OP he is, his body starts breaking down and he's like doubled over in pain and can't continue to fight. So then toward the end, they know, all of the main characters know, like, we can defeat him if we drive him past that point where his body starts breaking down and he's in so much pain he can no longer battle us. And it's kind of, not going to say formulaic, but it's what I might call routine, and there's nothing exceedingly unique about how he gets stronger. They have to continue to intensify the stakes towards the very end of the movie. Obviously, everything, peaks like that at the end of a movie. That's just how it is. As they are raising the stakes toward the very end of the movie, the heroes manage to push the villain to that threshold where they know his body's going to start falling apart and he's going to be so overcome by pain that he's not going to be able to keep fighting them. Well, they get him to that point, and then he just gets stronger in the final battle, and it doesn't make any sense. Obviously it's one of those things where things have to continue to raise in stakes and intensity and pressure toward the end of a movie, but it defies the system they set up until this point in regard to how to actually defeat him. And what, like, my fiance and I kind of inferred at the end of the movie is that up until this point, the character has been seeking out the ability to heal himself. So he is not killed and he is not destroyed by all of these powers that he's trying to contain in his body. His objective at the beginning of the movie is to do this kind of megalomaniac god complex thing where I'm going to liberate the world and stuff, and it will belong to the powerful from now on. But his current short-term goal is to steal somebody's quirk that allows him to heal so he can continue to stay healthy and live throughout seeing this goal being realized. And what they don't explain well in the middle of that last battle is that when they push him to that threshold where he can no longer go on and his body starts breaking down, once he realized that he was going to die and that his short-term goal of attaining this healing ability was no longer going to happen, he then just reverted to focusing on his long-term goal and kind of conceding that he was not going to be able to see it being brought about, but he was just falling back on fixating on that goal itself. They needed to explain that the reason the character got stronger was not just because they were lazily poorly writing a way to intensify the plot toward the end of the movie. It was because he gave up on that goal of, I'm going to preserve my own life in order to see my God complex goal realized. It wasn't about that anymore. He realized, I'm going to die. I am now reverting to obsessing over my goal because it's the only thing I have to sustain me and keep me going through this battle. And because he lost his self-preservation, had accepted that he was going to die, that's why when he hit that wall, instead of going down, he got stronger. They failed to explain that in the movie. If that's something that we as avid watchers and fans of the series inferred and mentioned to each other to confirm that's what was going on, that's not good writing.
What? I'm in the middle of something.
Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? It just looked like an incredibly lazy, poorly written way to just make the story more intense. They didn't explain why they broke their own rules they established earlier in the plot for you to follow along with. And it could have been, it would have been so easy for them to do so. Just allocate 30 more seconds, 10, 15 more seconds in that very moment to explain in an inner monologue that he's giving up on his own life, and that's why he's letting go of his reservations and getting stronger. And they didn't do that, and I don't understand why. But then the other thing, this is a major spoiler, obviously, hence my silly little MS Paint banner here. The thing that I'm pretty sure Horikoshi was referring to that he took out of the finale of the series, the two main heroes, the two main characters that this whole story centers on, Midoriya and Bakugo, are on the cusp of being killed. And the people that they have sacrificed their lives to protect are about to be gotten by the bad guy. So in their last moment of desperation, both of them having fought almost to the end of their lives to try to save these people, Midoriya tells Bakugo, there's only one thing left we can do. Something to the effect of like, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And because Midoriya, his limbs are broken from using One for All to try and kill this bad guy, and they don't know what else to do, and they're completely out of options, Midoriya gives One for All to Bakugo. Which is insane. Which is an amazing plot point. So it's treated, obviously, as if Midoriya can't get it back. Once you pass One for All on to someone else, you no longer have it. It's like he's sacrificing everything he's fought for up to this point. He's willing to going back to being this quirkless, powerless character to save these lives. And Bakugo recognizes the gravity of this decision that Midoriya is making. But both of them recognize that saving the lives of innocents is what they are meant to do. And it's what drives them. It's what compels them. It's what makes them do what they do. So they do it. And it's amazing. Up until this point, there have been a lot of like different like 3D effects and stuff in the show. Like there are storms and there's lightning and there are different things. Up until this point, the like 3D animation felt really discordant to me. Like the roiling storm clouds and the couple different like the smoke effects and things, they look really not fake necessarily, but they are so different from the actual 2D animation that it's really jarring and doesn't look good. And there are ways you can do like really obvious 3D computer animation to make it look good, to make it fit, to make it appear cohesive with 2D animation. And I think they failed up until this point. It was distracting. It totally destroys your immersion, and it doesn't make what you're looking at look like it's all one plane of existence. It doesn't look like it's all in the same world. But this final battle where Midoriya is like, the entire battle at Kamino, All Might had already sacrificed his power, but the echoes, the shockwaves of that power within him were enough for him to continue to fight on and use One for All long after. And I know I've got some reserves of this power left in me, and I know I can do this. So Midoriya and Bakugo both use One for All to defeat this villain, and it is amazing. And the way this is animated, my fiance said it reminded him of Mob Psycho 100, because the way this final battle, the way the power pouring off of them, the way the earth being destroyed under and around them as they defeat this villain, with, I think it's a Detroit Smash, I'm not sure what move it is. That animation is like mixed media animation, but it is gorgeous. It is cohesive. It is beautifully, artfully done. It's amazing. It's impactful. It's powerful. It is so freaking cool. But then the thing is, because that was something that Horikoshi wanted to be done in the finale of the show, because like at the end of My Hero Academia, he wanted Midoriya, like, to have to give One for All to Bakugo, and because the series can't exactly go on if they like slam the entire story to a grinding halt there and get rid of it, they had to undo that for the end of the movie, which obviously like you knew was going to happen. But the explanation they give for why Midoriya retains One for All makes very little sense. Like, I was thinking as this was happening, the story has to go on. Midoriya still has to have One for All. So how are they going to explain that away? How is Bakugo able to use One for All with him? You know, like, it makes sense that Bakugo would know the moves because they were both huge fans of All Might. They both have obsessively studied All Might's technique. Bakugo has obsessively studied Midoriya's technique. He knows that the sheer power rampaging through his body will break his limbs. Like, Bakugo knows how this is going to happen. So that was something that could be explained. You know, it made sense that Bakugo would know how to use whatever move it was with Midoriya. But how did Midoriya keep the power after that happened? You know, it doesn't make any sense. And if you've gone ahead in the story, if you've read the manga beyond whatever point this movie is supposed to take place at, you know that Midoriya still has One for All. So it completely robs this moment of impact. Not completely, but it does to an extent. I've seen more of the anime. I've seen more of the manga, so you know that Bakugo doesn't go on to be the one having One for All and being trained by whoever, All Might or whoever. Unfortunately, that kind of takes away from that moment because you know to an extent it's not permanent. Or if it is, you're thinking, how could it be? As opposed to being awed by the impact of it. You're thinking about how could this be? The explanation that like he and All Might come up with is that like somehow all the former users of One for all the prior people who held, you know, bore the mantle, I can't speak English, oh dear, they like defied the way the quirk works because it was Midoriya was the chosen one. He was the next chosen one in the lineage. They somehow miraculously made him retain One for All despite him trying to give it to Bakugo because it's the only way they could stop this guy and save these people. That kind of sucks too because Bakugo is a remarkable hero. His personality is not necessarily compatible with the mantle of One for All and who All Might would choose and who All Might's like friends and confidants would want him to choose. Thinking of Mirio having been the one that other people wanted One for All to be given to. But this implication that, like, I mean, obviously it's about Midoriya. It's not about Bakugo not being good enough. It's about Midoriya being the one who it's meant to be given to next. But it feels like the previous users of One for All are almost like, no, it can't be Bakugo. Like, we're going to defy the very laws of the quirk in order to keep it from being Bakugo. You know, it feels that way to an extent to me. I'm like, well, that's weird because as much as it's about how utterly worthy and good enough Midoriya is, there's still that other side of the coin where I couldn't help but feeling like it's also that Bakugo is so unworthy, which doesn't make sense because I'm sure some of the previous wielders of One for All would not have agreed with All Might choosing Midoriya. But Midoriya is the one who is now the holder of One for All. If he thinks Bakugo is worthy, that's all that should be needed. That should be enough. And it wasn't, and that didn't make any sense to me. And then the other thing that doesn't make any sense is that the poorly cobbled together explanation from Midoriya is that like somehow what we think happened is a technicality, like because Kachan fell unconscious before One for All could be fully transferred to him, the transfer didn't happen. And somehow, when he woke up, he didn't remember anything about it. What? Bakugo is incredibly intelligent. He has spent a huge chunk of his life obsessing over All Might, and since then he has spent a huge chunk of his life obsessing over Midoriya. He's smart enough to figure out what happened. If he wakes up with his arm broken and mangled in the exact same way that Midoriya's limbs are mangled when he uses too much of One for All and can't control it, he's way too smart to not know what happened. He's way too smart not to at least suspect that that's what happened somehow in the heat of that battle. If he doesn't remember what happened, what explanation could they have given him to explain what happened that would have been comprehensive enough? Because Midoriya is not a very good liar. And we know that Toshinori is a terrible liar. He's not good at things like that. He wouldn't be good at coming up with a lie at the last minute. That's not the way his intelligence works. So that whole explanation at the end of the movie made very, very little sense to me. And it's just, Bakugo's too smart for that. He would at least suspect something like that happened. And I get that maybe they have to make it that he doesn't remember it because obviously this is an isolated story and they need canon to proceed uninterrupted, more or less, which nullifies the movie, and I don't understand why having the movie if the story's not going to be changed by it whatsoever. But that doesn't make any sense. You know, and what would go wrong if Bakugo had it? Like, as much as Bakugo has grown recently in the series, I don't think it would destroy his psyche to know that he had One for All and it wasn't for him. On the contrary, that would have been an extraordinary example of how much he has matured. Him having accepted that All Might chose Midoriya, I don't have to like it, but this is Midoriya's right. This is Midoriya's responsibility now, and he has earned it, and I respect that. And I got to feel what it was like. You know, like, I think Bakugo would be an incredible amount of strife, but I truly believe that Bakugo would have been able to handle the psychological ramifications of having been passed One for All by Deku and then losing it. That was what bothered me the most about this movie. That did not make any sense. Like, obviously Bakugo couldn't keep One for All, or he couldn't have taken it from Deku, but I did not like how they handled it. It didn't make any sense. Both that the prior users of One for All who are with Deku in spirit would stop the transfer when Deku deemed somebody worthy and deemed it necessary to do so at that time. And the idea that Bakugo wouldn't know that something like that happened is ridiculous. Like, any lie that just All Might and Midoriya could have come up with together would not be enough. He is so smart. He's distrusting of people by nature. If his arm is mangled in the exact same freaking way that Izuku's limbs are mangled when he uses too much of One for All for his body to handle, he wouldn't have just been like, what the hell happened in my sleep to mangle my arm like this? What did you people do to me? And storm off. And it being a comical moment, that wouldn't happen. He's way too smart for that. He would have figured out what happened. And that was my main problem with the movie. It's like that would have been such a massive step forward in their relationship, because the whole series is about Midoriya and Bakugo's relationship and how it compels them both to, God, I don't want to say go beyond again. That's so stupid. But literally, that's literally what it is. They compel each other to go beyond anything they could have without that driving, opposing magnetic force of one another in their lives. The entire series is about how Midoriya and Bakugo drive each other to become these exceptional people, better than they ever could have been without one another in their lives. And it just sucks that that had to be taken away from the finale, because that, what could have been more bittersweet and gut-wrenching and heartbreaking than that? Then at the end of the series, they're both on the cusp of death fighting some villain, And after everything Midoriya has fought for, him having to hand that off to Bakugo, proving how much he trusts Bakugo, how highly he thinks of Bakugo. He trusts him with the future. He's willing to give up his legacy. And how symbolic that is of just them exemplifying what heroes are and what being a hero means. That would have been incredible, because they wanted to make another movie because they make so much money. They basically robbed that incredibly intense, impactful plot point of all the meaning it had. Like, if all that had happened, except Bakugo somehow having amnesia and forgetting it all happened, I would have loved this movie so much. And I still think it was better than the first movie. The pacing, the direction, the writing, I really, really liked it. It's a very good movie, but it makes everything feel like a lie. You know, everything that comes after this, it makes it feel like a lie. Like, how is Midoriya supposed to be in the same room as Bakugo when they're talking about One for All and its implications and its potential with All Might? And Midoriya and All Might both just know that Bakugo actually took the mantle and then that was taken away from him, and they both know exactly what happened and he doesn't, and they have to pretend? No, that's antithetical to so much that has been established in this series. Shit, man, that's my problem. That's my problem with the ending of the movie. I think it was a very, very solid movie. It basically isn't canon, because if it is canon, that means that Midoriya and Toshinori are withholding the secret from Bakugo that kind of like makes a mockery of him. And that also means that all of this strife, all of this misunderstanding between Midoriya and Bakugo being so competitive and paranoid and having been pitted against people his whole life to where he doesn't trust Midoriya, and he's so insecure that he cannot fathom Midoriya truly loving and admiring him and looking up to him and seeing him as a friend and someone to aspire to be like. This proved concretely, once and for all, that Midoriya truly admires him and trusts him and thinks the world of him. And it would have been such a perfect poetic tragedy for him to finally have to face the fact that Midoriya isn't mocking him, isn't looking down on him, has nothing but admiration and love for him at the moment where Midoriya sacrifices everything he has to give to Bakugo so they can save people and be true heroes. And I'm sure as thoughtful and careful as Horikoshi is about these things, as measured and strategic as he is about all of his writing, there has to be a reason that he decided that Bakugo has to not remember this happened. Is it just because it's way too soon in the series? That's probably what it is. It's way too soon in the series for him to have to face in a way that he cannot deceive himself or argue his way out of or lie to himself about, that Midoriya truly thinks that highly of him. That has to be what it is. It's too soon. But it feels so shitty because it feels like now Midoriya and All Might are complicit in withholding this life-changing secret from him. Carl said, studio didn't force him. The producers asked Horikoshi multiple times, are you absolutely sure this is okay? And the author said yes, and I'll just come up with a better ending. Well, that was something I was thinking of too. If that was Horikoshi's ending that he was thinking of early on, that is beautiful and poetic and fantastic. And it's like, I have faith he can think of something even better. If there's anybody on this planet who can think of an ending that's even more beautiful and poetic than that, it is Horikoshi. I believe that with every fiber of my being. I looked into Carl's statement that Horikoshi was more than okay with them using one of his old potential endings for the series in this movie. And that's how I came across this official interview done about the movie from one of the people from the creative team. And yes, they do confirm that. Let me read you his full answer so you get the full context. And I also want to point out that I didn't know this, but they actually tried to add drama to the trailer by including the fact that Horikoshi considers this to be a big chunk of the ending of BNHA. They teased that in some of the trailers to make it seem even more dramatic. So this is very relevant, and a lot of people probably had questions about this. The interviewer said, Horikoshi sensei mentioned that this movie contains elements from the last chapter of BNHA. Nagasaki said, yes, we did use an element that was originally planned in the manga's last battle and used it towards the end of this movie. When we discussed the ending elements of the story, we asked Horikoshi sensei, isn't this element what you had originally planned to use in the manga? However, Horikoshi sensei gave us the green light to use it. In fact, he probably wanted us to use it and gave us his support. From that, we were able to carry out the story and decide on various elements. Besides, Horikoshi sensei told us, I'll create an even better ending anyway, so it's all good. For us to use one of his premeditated ideas before he uses it himself, it really motivated me. He's such a cool mangaka. So it is good to know that Horikoshi gave them permission to use this element, because up until this point, the kind of hurried and forced feeling I got from this movie made it seem as if he had to take something out of the finale because he had no other choice, since he expected the first movie to be the only movie and was very limited in ways to actually up the ante and make the imagery and the symbolism and the meaning of the finale of the movie even more intense than the first one. So that's the official answer to that. In conclusion, I did like the movie, although that ending really, really bothered me, that ending detail. The villains were fine. The action was fantastic. I loved how much screen time. And it's not just screen time. I really loved how much the other classmates were included. And they were given pivotal important roles. Like Tokuyami was Tokuyami was fantastic in this. He was fantastic in this, and I would like to follow him and see like the impact that what happened in this movie had on him. Ida, you guys know I'm like completely head over heels in love with Ida, and in this he actually got some respect. He was the voice of reason. Like, we actually got to see Todoroki being really brash and being controlled by his anger, and Ida being the voice of reason to calm him down and say we need to regroup, we need to be thoughtful, and we need to plan this. Don't do this rash thing you're thinking about doing. What else? I don't know. I think I mentioned everything else. Yaoyorozu had probably the most action she's had since the last movie. Aoyama did well. Mineta was funny. It was really cute to see Koda doing well. Shoji got made fun of, which was not appreciated, but whatever. But at the end, it was really frustrating, like how much they teased the League of Villains crap and then they hardly showed any of them. Shigaraki popped up throughout the movie, which is good, but it almost felt like somebody who didn't know much about the series just knew he was the big bad of the time, and they kept like little smatterings of Shiggy throughout it. And at the end I was like, really? They really aren't gonna like cap it off with another little scene from the League of Villains at all? Like, it made the cameos, like the like stupid crappy like 30 seconds of fan servicey screen time every League member got, feel really sleazy and condescending. Like Dabi, everybody wants to bang this dude. Why? He's a crusty, disgusting moron. I have no clue why anybody would want to. Toga had like 3 lines. 2 or 3 lines the whole movie. Twice had almost nothing. What the hell? Why is Twice so underrated? What is wrong with these people? I really hope after the Meta Liberation Army arc he gets some credit. He will, but being one of the few people who's on it before it's cool and popular is really aggravating in this case, because Twice deserves so much more love than he gets. There's a really cute part at the end. The heroes get there, but it's after the kids already defeated the villains. They, if they hadn't gotten there in time and the kids hadn't done what they did, they would have been dead. The thing that was so cute that I adored was that, like, Endeavor's there at the end. And, like, there's a scene of Endeavor, he's, like, freaking out, like, hugging Todoroki, and Todoroki just looks disgusted and irritated, like a cat that's being snuggled. But, like, his dad is, like, losing it. Like, he looks like he's bawling his eyes out, like, holding Shoto off of the ground because he's so relieved his son is okay. Like, that's adorable. That is so sweet and so charming, and it's comical, It's a side of Enji that we don't really see a lot. There were some aspects I really, really liked. There were some aspects I didn't. And I did like it better than the first movie. I liked the pacing better. I didn't have time to be like, when is this thing going to happen? When is that thing going to happen? I was captivated. My attention was very much held the whole way through. I adore Midoriya and Bakugo's relationship. I think it's fascinating and incredibly compelling. Obviously, I think that or I wouldn't be watching the show. But I mean, it's incredibly gratifying as someone who is really invested in their relationship as it grows into an incredible friendship and partnership as heroes and rivals. And seeing Shigaraki in his very dapper, like, red pea coat was very nice, and his little red sneakers. I really like him, and I didn't used to. I'm not a well-adjusted adult by any stretch of the imagination. Thank you for your input and letting me know what you think. And that person who said that Horikoshi was sure he wanted to do this and he'll just think of a better ending, I need to confirm that. I need to look it up, but thank you for that. I appreciate that immensely. That's very interesting to hear, and it makes me feel better because it confirms one of my hopes. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and, you know, if it wasn't, please resolve to make tomorrow better, because you might not believe it, but I promise you, you are absolutely worth the effort. Thank you guys again so much for all your support. I love you. Yes, Homo, I love you guys dearly, and I hope you're having a good night. I'm gonna take my baby. I'm gonna hold his hand in my little finger, his little hand in my big finger. It's the perfect size to hold with one finger. And I'm gonna go to sleep now. So, yeah. You take it easy, guys. I love you very much, and I will see you again soon. I'm so sleepy.